And now, the Lowe Post.
Welcome to a Friday morning edition of the Lowe Post podcast, where I wanted to do a 4x4 version of my 8x8 first round podcast with the great David Thorpe of TrueHoop and many other things. But the basketball gods did not cooperate, and I don't want to get ahead of myself, because every time I get ahead of myself in this first round, the basketball gods mock me and laugh at me and wake me up at 5:30 in the morning with a headline like Warriors blow 31-point lead, Clippers stun Warriors in Game 5. So I'm not looking ahead to Warriors-Rockets. Coach Thorpe, how are you this morning?
I'm good. I think if Klay Thompson had the same approach you did, we might be a little bit better off this morning. But he's been talking about the Rockets game since the Rockets were up 3-0, kind of forgetting about his own series.
Yeah, I'm not looking ahead to that. I'm not looking. We can look ahead to Nuggets-Spurs Game 7. That's fine. And I'm writing on Bucks-Celtics, so we'll save that. So that leaves us with Toronto-Philly to talk about now, which I think is actually, after watching film of these two head-to-head. Now, the head-to-head matchup was 3-1 Toronto, and the only one Philly won was without Kawhi Leonard. But there are injuries dotting this entire regular season matchup. Tobias Harris played in 0 of the games. All the games were before the trade deadline. I am very bullish on Toronto. They were my pick to make the finals out of the East before the playoffs started. So naturally, I'm going to pick them in this series. There's just something about Philadelphia that hasn't quite earned my trust. And yet, when I sat down and watched a couple hours of these teams playing head-to-head against each other, I grew more confident in Philadelphia's chances. And the essential reason why is it's a very simple. This is a very even physical matchup. And I feel like both of these teams are physical teams. And so when they run into an opponent that can match them physically at the right positions, it becomes an interesting matchup for them. So it's been well documented. Toronto got Marc Gasol to guard Joel Embiid. Okay, great. He just reduced Nikola Vucevic to a puddle of missed mid-range jumpers in the first round. Kawhi Leonard has eaten Ben Simmons' lunch every time they've played. So that would make you optimistic about Toronto's chances. But Philly is just stacked with these huge physical wing guys, and between Butler, Simmons, Harris to a lesser extent, they can put Simmons and Butler on Kawhi and Lowry and switch every little two-man game they do. Joel is obviously physical against Gasol. I could see this being almost like an old school, ugly, very defense-oriented series that could involve in interesting ways. But give me whatever is interesting to you there, Coach. Give me your 10,000 feet take on this.
Okay, so I love your reference to the 80s because I have a similar one, but it's a little more narrow. When Kawhi Leonard is rolling, and I think he's rolling now, Zach. I want to get your impression after watching in the playoffs. But when he's at his best, he doesn't play anything like Jordan. I just think he ends up being kind of the same guy in the sense that he's never in a rush, and he has a counter now to everything you throw at him. So that's where, when I kind of looked at the matchup, Philadelphia to me kind of begins and ends right now with Embiid just destroying everybody, and then you can play off of that. And I do feel like Marc Gasol, the only team to really, there's two teams that did a great job against Embiid this year. The Nuggets did well, but no one did better than the Grizzlies in 2 games with Gasol, where he scored 29 points in 2 games, and Gasol took it so personally to be able to guard Embiid, and he can. And I watched him in the postseason compared to when they played, and I think Gasol moves about the same as he was doing back then. Remember, the first maybe 6 weeks of the season, Gasol was probably the defensive player of the year. He certainly didn't end that way, but he looks pretty nimble now. And so if Embiid is neutralized to some degree, he's obviously going to score. Then it goes to me, what can they do with Kawhi? I think your point on the wings for Philadelphia is great, but I don't know that it matters if this is the Kawhi that we'll see that we've seen recently. He just has a counter to everything you do individually defensively, and he's super willing to make the pass when you send a second guy, whether it's a hedge or a hard double or whatever. The Magic a couple of times trapped him early. He didn't panic at all and just made a simple pass. So I see it as, I agree with you. I think it's going to be a slugfest. And I just think Toronto's got heavier punchers. And the only other thing I look at is, they play 5 around 0 with Gasol on the perimeter, and Orlando can't do that with Jonathan Isaac nearly as well as I think Toronto can. And that means Embiid and potentially Boban, even though Serge is struggling from the perimeter a little bit, or maybe even a lot. That's going to force those big guys to come out, and I think there's a lot of driving lanes for all of Toronto's slashers.
Yeah, that's that much as it is in all of these series, much as it was for D'Angelo Russell, who could do nothing despite Joel Embiid dropping back on the pick and roll and all the opportunities that would seem to open up. Philadelphia depends a lot on their perimeter guys being huge and getting around picks so that even if there's a little daylight when you come around that screen and Joel Embiid's at the foul line, you just do not have room to pull up for a good shot, a clean 3, a clean 2, and they're going to force you to take floaters. Now, Toronto is much better equipped to sort of get in the lane and start pinging the ball around to better, as you said, perimeter players. There's no Jonathan Isaac was all right, but no one's afraid of Jonathan Isaac. The one guy you're not going to guard maybe is Pascal Siakam, and if you don't guard Pascal Siakam, that's not good. Pascal's good enough to exploit that. And to your point about when the Magic trapped they realized the Kawhi Gasol pick and roll is killing us. When Vucevic drops back, it's killing us. The looks are too good. The rotations are too severe. Let's try to trap this. I don't know that I've seen a team beaten worse on traps of a particular pick and roll than Orlando was in that series. Every time they trapped, it was a disaster. It was a wide open 3, or Kawhi splitting the defense and dunking, or Kawhi driving around the trap and dishing off to somebody who dunked. It was a total disaster. Now, Philly is way better, obviously, defensively, but those are all interesting plays. I just think, to your point about Kawhi and how he doesn't remind me of Jordan. I get why people are making the Jordan comparisons, but
are people doing that? I didn't even know that. I don't think he played like Jordan. I just thought the results were similar.
He gets where he wants to go. And I was watching him warm up the other day before Game 5 in Toronto. Yeah. I've never really noticed this. Take this, it's probably not worth anything, but he has one of the tightest and prettiest rotations on his jump shot that I've ever seen in the league. That thing is spinning perfectly straight up and down, and so fast that the entire ball is a blur. I mean, I don't know if I didn't watch him in college. I don't know if his jump shot had a rotation anything like that before Chip England and the Spurs got to him. But that thing is snapping off his wrist. And I don't know if you've ever watched. Next time you see, it looks like I was mesmerized for 10 straight minutes. It is perfect.
It's something, obviously, I probably watch in more shots than most people on the planet every single day. As soon as we're done here, I'm going to watch a couple of great shooters in my gym. And, yeah, that's something we see all the time. And remember, I've spent some time with Joakim Noah back in the day, and so I know what a weird-looking spin looks like. I think I've had 8 different guys at 40% or better from the NBA in my gym. And I'm not suggesting I helped any of them shoot that well, maybe 1 or 2, but I'm glad that I was able to watch what amazing shooters look like. Kawhi, some guys are real fluid, natural, Zach. I don't think Kawhi is. I think he's been built. He's like a robo player. He's really not. He's a fluid mover to some degree, but he's not. He's more mechanical either way. But I just think it works to his benefit because you just can't speed the guy up, and that's why I say because he's so under control, he always has the counter that you need to have. And by the way, I love that you watch guys pregame. I always make that a habit. I'd recommend anyone listening to this get to a game as early as you can and watch guys in warm-ups. I happen to have always enjoyed doing that. The one thing for me when you talk about the perimeter game, and we know, and I think you probably know that when Ben Simmons was coming out in the draft, I wrote that I thought he had a chance to be Defensive Player of the Year one year. I think he's a 6'10" version of Jason Kidd. He's got some of the quickest hands I've ever seen. Well, even back then, I thought that. Super quick feet. I know he's not the longest guy in the world, but because he's so tall, he's not short. He's not short-armed. I think he's built to be a spectacular player defensively. But right now, his biggest weakness is off-the-ball defense, because I think on the ball he can be really special in games. And the Raptors, to use your word, they kind of sneakily have a little pin-down or Pistons action game with Kawhi, where if Simmons is on him, they're gonna pin him down. And Ben doesn't slither around screens great, and Kawhi doesn't need much room. And if you are trailing him too significantly, he'll just drive and then figure stuff out. I just feel like they're going to use him as a hammer in a way that Philly wants to use Embiid. But I think Gasol is a better matchup than anyone than Philly has to guard Kawhi.
Yeah, they started against Orlando. They started using some of the they reminded me a little bit of like Adelman actions and the stuff the Heat used to use, where they would have Kawhi and Lowry screen for each other in the corner, and as Gasol held the ball at the elbow and tried to get switches and just sort of see what happened and let those two guys read, like, oh, should I cut back door here? Lots of teams have done this, but with Kyle and Kawhi particularly, they leaned on it a little bit more, which is why. So let's go granular. I think the matchups are really interesting and just sort of who guards who, and that's always an interesting Philly thing because of how weird and big their team is. Right. So let's start with Philly's defense. Okay. To me, there are two constants. When it's starters versus starters, there are only two constants that I think Philly will try to get every time they can. Embiid on Gasol, obviously. And I think Tobias Harris has to guard Siakam. I just don't see a better place for him to go. Now in transition and when there's always a million cross matches with Philly. So, let's just take this as like when Philly gets to have what they want.
Yeah, there's a dead ball, so Toronto's inbounding the ball.
Yes. I think those are the only two constants. I think who Redick, Simmons, and Butler defend is going to be very interesting. You could put Redick on Lowry and Simmons on Kawhi and Butler on Danny Green. But I think if I'm them, I want to switch that Lowry-Leonard action as much as possible. So I wonder if we'll start with Redick on Danny Green, Simmons on Kyle Lowry, because Simmons has sort of been their point guard, defender, de facto guy. And that leaves Butler on Kawhi, which is just a brutal matchup. Kawhi's got a little bit of like length on him. And Kawhi's great at shooting over guys. He doesn't need a lot of length advantage to be able to do that. But Butler is just such a monster defensively. And I would like to see how, Simmons obviously has the physicality, the length, whatever, to guard Kawhi, although his arms aren't so long. Simmons better, like that is a tough, brutal, like you're going to get elbows in the guts and the ribs, and it's just a nasty matchup. What do you think of that sort of plot out of who guards who? Because I think against Philly,
that's how I wrote it.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, that's how I wrote it. That's exactly what I expected to be. I'm looking at my notes right now. I think that, well, first of all, I think JJ needs to guard Danny Green and is more than capable. He's a super smart defender. First of all, let's go back to JJ. It's one of my favorite references. When people thought he couldn't defend, it was mind-boggling to me. Mike Krzyzewski is a well-known man-to-man guy, played for Bobby Knight, of course. JJ, early in his career, when everyone used to go at him, and I used to go to the games in Orlando, it's a 2-hour drive for me, when teams would come in, and when he was a young player, every other team that they ISO'd him as much as they could for a million reasons that we don't have to get into now. You can figure him out a lot, and part of it was just him being such a famous player from Duke. But I tell you what, he got to be really good at chasing shooters off screens. Very good. Like a little dog, like Patrick Beverley, although Beverley's better on the ball. JJ slithers around screens really well and is dogged about it. But you also have to have some intelligence when you're guarding Danny Green, a top 3 shooter maybe. I think, was he number 2 in the league this year? Was he number 1 maybe?
And he's not like one of these dudes who needs like 10 feet of open space.
No, he gets gone fast.
He's got a quick release, and he's gotten more confident in his career about like, yeah, I can take some of these threes he's taking in Toronto are like, I think 4 years ago or 3 years ago, Pop would have been like, you can't take that, dude. That's that's like, you got someone draped all over you. He's letting it fly, and it's worked out for him.
It's an amazing point you just made, and if you want to go back to the Jackie McMullen's amazing summertime article, which chronicled when the Spurs just destroyed LeBron's last team in Miami, I always guessed what Pop said to his team going in that series, and one of them was, I think he said to Danny and Kawhi, just let it fly. Like, if we're open for a moment, just shoot that thing, because Miami's defense was so fast that year, and I think that really gave Danny a reference point that he just needed that freedom, and he's got it now. It's a big part of what they do, because you have to be so quick to trigger the help back to him, and that allows the other actions to work better. But Redick has got a super quick mind. He's obviously experienced, very, very experienced. And so he'll do some degree of nice help in the paint and quick recovery back. I think you're right on the Simmons-Lowry because Kyle loves to push, especially with 5-around 0 offense and transition. They come all down, and really Toronto does a lot of things that Milwaukee does. They leave the paint open, and it's hard to do that against Ben Simmons. I was just trying to imagine. I was watching a bunch of Lowry tape where he just pushes, kind of slows down. I call it a settle dribble near the 3-point line, and then boom, hits you with that quick drive, and he's good at it, and he's super smart and crafty. But Ben Simmons is going to gobble that up. It's not going to be so easy for him. The Butler-Leonard thing, everything you described is perfect. And then don't you just wonder how they're going to call these series, because Leonard can be an incredible foul magnet. And that, I think Philly's bench is a huge weakness. We could argue maybe Toronto's too. I think it's better than Philly's, but some people don't agree with me. Butler getting in foul trouble. Simmons, that's why I don't think Simmons will be on Leonard as much as he's going to overpower Ben in a way that he can't easily overpower Jimmy. And but either way, he's a foul magnet, and Philly can't afford that. So that's why I think they might double some. It's just to avoid foul trouble.
Yeah, one of the interesting things about Simmons guarding point guards is that it presents a lot of opportunities for Philly to post Simmons on the other end when that matchup, when the other team can't get out of that. They did not do that a lot against Brooklyn. And, they also, they usually run into teams, now this won't be one of them, where either Butler or Harris has a size advantage. And you want to say, dump it in. But it's really hard to dump it into one of those guys when both Embiid and Simmons are on the floor, because there's just no space for them to go anywhere on the block. Simmons, though, if he has a mismatch, well, he's one of the two guys that's taking up that space anyway. But Lowry is just, we'll talk about the matchups on the other end. Lowry is just unmovable in the post. The guy's a foot taller. They just can't move him. He draws charges. And by the way, I do think I'm so tired of little guys getting the benefit of the doubt in the post. It's like JJ Barea is the best post defender in the entire NBA because all he has to do is fall over. He just falls over and everyone's like, oh, he just got elbowed in the face. It's offensive foul because he's short. And I do think Kyle is a much better post defender than JJ Barea because he's just a cinder block. But I do think part of the reason he's so good at drawing offensive fouls is because these refs are just, if you're little in the play, it's Patrick Beverley's benefiting from the same thing. And Kevin Durant actually said it. He called it out. He said because he's a foot shorter than me, they let him do whatever he wants. Now, KD is not a back it down post up guy who's going to knock people over just sort of in the natural run of I'm just kind of sick of these little guys getting the benefit of the doubt. That's the end of that. But to your point, the Redick on Green, they're going to hunt JJ. When these series get slow and nasty and ugly, they devolve into let me find the guy I want to attack, and that's going to be JJ. The Nets did that early in the series and really roasted him, and they were less effective at it going on. And I just think putting him on Danny Green at least make Toronto go through another step or two before that matchup materializes, because sometimes you run out of time. Sometimes just stuff happens and you don't get to it. If he's on Danny Green, I got to at least run some screening action on or off the ball to get the matchup I want. And all of a sudden there's 8 on the shot clock and there's help defenders in the lane, and it just doesn't work out as well. So that's why, I don't know. I like that setup, but we're going to see a lot of things.
Listeners, hiring, I can imagine, is one of those things that can be challenging and time consuming. There are hundreds of job boards. Do you have to post your ad on every one? How do you know that you're not missing the one job board that has the right person? But there's one place where you can go that makes it simple, fast, and smart, and that place is ZipRecruiter.com/LowPost, the name of this podcast. ZipRecruiter sends your job automatically to over 100 of the web's leading job boards, and they don't even stop there. They have powerful matching technology that scans thousands of resumes and proactively finds people with the right experience, and then double proactively invites them to apply to your job. You've done nothing except use ZipRecruiter. Bam, they've found people for you. ZipRecruiter is so effective that 80% of employers, that's a lot. If you shoot 80% from the foul line, that's pretty good. 80% of employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate through the site within the first day. You pretty much can't do any better than that. Right now, my listeners can try ZipRecruiter for free, nothing at this exclusive web address, ZipRecruiter.com/LowPost. the name of this podcast, LOWEPOST. That's ZipRecruiter.com/LowPost. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire.
Let's go to the other side.
Yeah.
Toronto defending Philly. What's interesting to you there matchup wise?
Well, Kawhi can guard, 4 of the 5 probably pretty well. But I just think he's got to carry such an offensive load that they've got to be careful with where they put him. I can see them matching up the same way that you described it from Philly's side. Obviously, we know Gasol's got to guard Embiid. Lowry might. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised at all if Lowry guards JJ some.
Absolutely,
it's an issue because Philly's going to run JJ through. They're going to run JJ, meaning Lowry, through the ringer, right? He's going to have to run into a lot of bodies, but the center block, as you described, on wheels. He's really a center block on wheels.
Yeah.
He'll just bounce off guys.
It's like it's
probably wise to try to do that.
Remember they had Dwayne Casey had the big rock in his office that was like pounding the Jacob Reese pounding the rock. It's like Kyle Lowry is like if they put that rock on wheels and just moved it all around the floor. It's amazing.
Right. It'd be smart to try to wear him down some. I think is he the oldest? I think he's the oldest starter in the series. Just try to get into his legs a little bit. I don't think it'll affect him too much, but it's not fun to guard JJ Redick. Philly's starting 5. Let's just be clear. I looked up the postseason. The best starting 5 in the first round was Philly's starting 5 in terms of net rating, and the second best starting 5 was Toronto's. And they also were right there in total minutes. But some starters like Boston starters with Baines were like a -0.3 in the average 10 minutes a game. These two starters, played 20 minutes or so a game. They're in there a lot more. But I just think, with what they want to do with Kawhi, and it's not just the starting matchups, Zach. I'm curious how they'll defend because when I've watched Toronto play this year, there's been times where Gasol switched. There's been times where I thought he would switch onto a smaller guy, but didn't. And then there's times where he hard hedged and came back. I actually love the nuance of that. You don't really always know what you're getting, and sometimes I feel like they're not even scripting it. They're just telling Mark, feel it out, and then telling everyone else, read Mark. If Mark decides he wants to fully switch, then let's react accordingly. And if he decides he wants to get back, then we can react to that too. Just kind of trust what Mark's going to do. And his nimbleness and his ability to move around in space is so underrated, and he knows how to, I think he gets in Embiid's skin. It'll be better this time because Embiid can focus on him more, but there was a play the last time they played Memphis where Embiid was behind 3, and you would have sworn, Zach, if you watched in slow motion, that Gasol was telling Embiid, go ahead and shoot the 3. I'm good with that. And then Embiid took the bait, and Gasol blocked it so easily. He's longer than you think, and he's super smart.
He's long and he covers space faster than you think. He covers north-south space. He slides from below the 3-point arc to above the 3-point arc with his big arm up faster than jump shooters think he's going to be able to.
He's such a gifted defensive player. So to me, I'm looking at Kawhi and again, I think he's going to have to carry a huge offensive load and they've got to try to get him some rest somewhere.
You mentioned the bench stuff, and I'll get to my starter matchups in a second, but one of the interesting subplots, and I think it's a subplot that will reveal itself right away, is, the Sixers have this incredibly elaborate, staggering minutes system where their starters are on the floor at the start of the second quarter when most teams have their bench on the floor. And I just think, the Raptors have to be careful giving too many minutes for Embiid to destroy Ibaka in the post. And they've been playing these Siakam as the only starter on the floor lineups against Orlando to start the second and fourth quarters. Although Kyle Lowry, when they cared, would be in those lineups too. I just think they're going to have to be a little more. It'd be interesting to see if they let it play out for a game and see what it looks like with Ibaka on Embiid and sending more help there. If they can make some hay there, or if they try to match the minutes right away. But speaking of more help there, in watching film of this series, it really underlined to me why the Sixers went and got Tobias Harris and probably overpaid for Tobias Harris. But Tobias is very good. In a lot of these games, or for a lot of these minutes, Toronto-Philly minutes, they had Lowry guard Wilson Chandler. And that has now become Tobias Harris, and the level of help you can offer off of Chandler versus Harris is obviously the difference is astronomical. You can help a lot off of one and not very much off of the other. But an alignment that I think is interesting is Lowry on Harris, and they'll switch Lowry on anyone. Lowry on Jonathan Isaac, Lowry on Gordon, Kawhi on Simmons, because I think we have to see that a lot. I just think you have to try to take out Simmons. You have to try to take out the 12 to 14 easy points they get every game by Simmons just bull rushing in transition. Green on Redick, Gasol on Embiid, and that leaves Siakam on Jimmy Butler, which is a matchup that we saw here and there in the regular season. And I just kind of like the idea of Siakam as the just all court weapon. Just mix up where he is, who he's on, give them lots of different looks and sort of weaponize Siakam in that way. Like if Lowry on Harris is the matchup you like, and by the way, starting in game 3 or 4 of the Brooklyn series, D'Angelo Russell on Harris was the matchup that Brooklyn liked. Dare them to post up Harris. Dare them to post up Harris with Embiid and Simmons on the block, and I don't think it's going to work. That allows you to sort of use Siakam in lots of different ways, and it allows you to put Danny Green on Redick, which I think is an interesting matchup. I just think we're going to see a lot of interesting matchups, and that's one that wouldn't surprise me if Toronto even started that way. It wouldn't surprise me if Lowry guarded Jimmy Butler a lot because he likes those physical matchups. I think he likes those better than chasing around J.J. Redick.
I think there's no question about that. He enjoys the physical play. I remember Jameer Nelson was the same way. I used to laugh when people try to post that dude up. He's impossible. He's the same thing as Lowry and tough as nails. Philly kid. Just tough kid in the post, and you don't got to run around so much. One thing on the other side that I wanted to mention is I was watching Kawhi in the. I just saw a different level of energy in Kawhi in the postseason as they needed. I mean, they lost game 1, and by the way, no small feat to beat a very good Magic team 4 straight games, and I think 2.5, 3 were kind of blowouts where they dominated at least 3 quarters in I think all but one of those games. Orlando was playing really well at the end of the season for a few months, and that when they to lose game 1, I'm curious if you're going to go to game 1 this time in Toronto because I can't imagine the stress level in that place. But anyway, Leonard
I think they should just forfeit. I think they should just get it over with and forfeit. Just play Chris Boucher. Just throw all the deep bench out there. And by the way, this is an Anunoby series. I don't know. I have no idea what his timetable is. This would be a great. But yeah, just forfeit. It's a tradition at this point. Just make it part of the lore of the Raptors.
If it's even a 10-point game in the fourth quarter, that crowd's going to be so stressed. But Kawhi's ability to hit the glass and willingness to, when you talk about fighting JJ, that becomes a problem. If JJ ultimately is on Kawhi, he doesn't have to be the one to shoot the ball. JJ's going to struggle to keep him off the glass, and whereas the other guys won't. And so I do think, and you're totally right, when you try to find the right matchup, you bring in the 6th defender, which is the clock, right? And I don't know how the game's going to be played. I think Toronto's willing to play a little bit faster, but certainly the Sixers want to push with Ben in transition. I think Toronto's uniquely built with guys that can get back and give a problem. The reason why you say there's so many great matchups to look at is these are two of the best 4 or 5 starting lineups in the league. Like neither team is bringing a fantastic player off the bench like some of these teams we see in the postseason.
And 2 of the best defensive teams in the league. Regular season, I think I have the playoff numbers in front of me. Let me get where they ranked regular season. They were 5 and for Toronto, and the Philly was only 14th. But when they gear up, they're very good. And you just hit on one of the other subplots, and then the last thing, and then you can give me 2 quick predictions, and I'll get you out of here. Toronto pushing the pace. To me, that if there's a mini battleground within the battleground that I'm watching closely in this series, it's Philadelphia's offensive rebounding against Toronto's transition game. The Raptors were a shaky defensive rebounding team, 18th in the league for the season. Now they improved with Gasol, and they're better with Gasol on the floor. And Philly is a monstrous offensive rebounding team, particularly when they sense a chance to be. They were only 11th in the regular season, but when they sense a chance, when they sense mismatches, they love to crash. And I think they sense an opportunity to do that in this series, and Toronto senses an opportunity. If we can clean up the glass, if we can be a little better, if we can tighten it up, we're going to be able to run on them. And they love to run when they have Lowry and Siakam on the floor together. That's a sort of game within the game that I think will be sort of a bellwether. And in Philly, statistically, Toronto is like the most efficient transition offense in the league, according to my friend Ben Folk's site, Cleaning the Glass. Philly, very interestingly, allows. Now, again, these numbers aren't exact in terms of what's a transition chance and what isn't and blah, blah, blah. But according to his methodology, Philly allows, I think, the third most transition chances in the league, but is number 1 or 2 at points allowed per possession on those chances. That seems like a really hard line to walk, but they have walked it because I think they're fast and they're huge and they chase down and recover more quickly than people expect. But that's just sort of one battle within the battle that I'm watching. Spurs Nuggets Game 7. Who you got?
Oh boy, I picked the Spurs before the season, before the series, and the way Jokic. I mean, he only scored 9 points in Game 1. I thought he was going to score 50 last night.
Oh my God.
Magnificent. He's such. I actually wrote this. We did a little at TrueHoop. We did like a watch party where people can watch the game with us and chime in on a Slack channel that we have. And I said if he ever follows the Body by Kevin Love, I called it, like he's going to win a bunch of MVPs. He's one of the most gifted players I've ever seen in my life. And he's just heavy, and it works with advantage to some degree, but it also plays against him some because as soon as he went out of the game yesterday, they went, I think, from down 3 to down 15.
No, it was over. It was over.
Yeah, but they figured out how to basically. What they figured out is just run our regular stuff anyway. I know San Antonio's sloughing off, whatever. He can't be guarded, and that worries me as someone who picked the Spurs to win. But I still kind of feel like the veterans on San Antonio, I don't really care much about experience until Game 7s, and I just think they have enough veterans, and they live to take tough shots. I mean, the Denver got better shots all night last night, and Spurs still won easily.
The Spurs shot making last night was outrageous, and I'm sitting there watching the game, and I don't know. I've never coached one of these games where it's high stakes, high leverage, but all series I've been saying, you just got to live with LaMarcus Aldridge and DeMar DeRozan making 18-foot fadeaways over good defense. And by the way, Jokic, the third quarter last night was the best quarter of Jokic's career because he was so good defensively. Like, he got 2 steals, he got knockaways, they couldn't move him, he was zoning up in the correct places, but they're making all those shots. And I'm sitting there writing in my notes, do not overreact to that. Make them make those shots. But in Game 7, if they make them, you lose. If they make there is no margin for error left. It's a 1-game sample size. You can't play, well, the analytics say if you shoot 150, you're going to win. No, there isn't 150. There's just these like 7. And I don't know as a coach, I just how you can sit and watch that happen. And so if LA makes his first 3 18-footers, I could see Denver like, well, we got to send help. And then that's when they start sending help, it makes me nervous.
No, you're totally right. You have to live with that, but it's like guarding Dirk on his 19-foot fadeaways in his prime. Those were layups, and so you really didn't know what to do because you're going to give them literally uncontested layups if you send a second guy early. Otherwise, you got to live with Dirk making it, and it's almost the same percentage. And so I just think how you phrase it is right. They've got to make that decision, and I just think that Denver's going to just live with it, and I'm going to trust the Spurs experienced guys. Remember, the series should be over. Jamal Murray doesn't go crazy on fire hot in Game 2. The series is a wrap. And but I think actually, if you want to predict an overtime game, I predict an overtime game. I think the teams are very, very even. Of course, we're going to the Game 7. It's not such a rocket science thing to say, but I give the Spurs the slightest advantages. But that's all it is, just a slight advantage.
Yeah, to me, it's a coin flip. I picked Nuggets in 6 to win the series, so I guess I have to stick with the Nuggets. But just a word on Jokic. Everyone knows I love Jokic. He's just some of the good things he does. They're so good that you don't even notice them. Like he had a Kevin Love home run baseline out of bounds inbounds pass last night to Gary Harris. That was just like outrageous. It was like he just caught the one hand, boom, done. And then he had this other play where This is one of my favorite things that he does. He got a defensive rebound and he started dribbling and he looked at Gary Harris on the right sideline and motioned with his hand and like his entire face, like his eyes widen and he's like, go. He doesn't say it. He just says it with his body. And like Gary Harris didn't get it right away and it got me like, will you freaking go? And Gary Harris went and Jokic whoosh, clothesline, like 40-foot bounce pass up the floor and Gary Harris draws a shooting foul out of it. And the way he dribbles, he's never been better. Like he's had better full court, fast break stuff in his career. His dribbling in the half court in this series has been unbelievable in terms of how under control it is, how he sees the help coming toward him and sort of brings his dribble in a little bit, protects it, but keeps it alive, changes its pace, and just sort of, with a live dribble, protects it, and just sort of sees like, okay, what are you going to do now? Now you've come here. Where are you going next? Who's coming this direction? And then like, boom, okay, you're doing that. Here's an open shooter. He's been one of the absolute studs of the playoffs. And if I could trust anyone else on the team to have a big game, I would pick them to win Game 7. I just can't trust any of these guys. They're so up and down. It's crazy. But he's just been masterful.
Yeah, I want to say one thing about him too. I want to reference your last pod. I think was with Arnovitz, and it was I listen to you when I'm doing my afternoon exercising, and I have to laugh out loud and some of the stuff that Kevin says. And so he was trying to make a football reference and like an analogy, and he couldn't think of any. I just had to laugh because he doesn't watch the NFL, nor do I. But I know what Tom Brady is, and that's who Jokic reminds me of actually. And I think I even tweeted this yesterday, or maybe I just put it in our Slack thing. He's like Tom Brady. He reads the game like a quarterback. And what's funny is the Spurs they're kind of, they want him to shoot it, right? And so they lay off of him, not just because they're trying to get him to shoot it, but because if they guard him, and we talked about this on your pod a couple weeks ago, you can't really contest him the way you might a regular-looking person like a Rondo, because he'll just thread the pass so perfectly. Well, it turns out you can't lay off him either, because even though you know the pass is coming, Pirtle is 10 feet off of him, waiting for the curl screen or the back door, and he still delivers the perfectly placed bounce pass that's hyper accurate is the word I like to use, and they still get the layup. And that reminded me of with a few times I've watched the NFL in the last 10 years when teams know what Brady's going to do and they're in perfect position, but there's like a 3-centimeter window for him to throw the ball to, and that's exactly what he does, and they score or get the first down. So Jokic is that ability as a big man. You can work on dribbling. Like I happen to think that Europeans are doing a better job than Americans right now at just developing all of our bigs that aren't super athletic. We have too many heavier guys in America that aren't being treated as anything but low post smashers. And the Europeans are doing a better job of fluidly teaching them the game. Who knows what the body will look like one day, and if they're going to be super gifted. Well, Jokic has developed that, and so his ability to make those kinds of plays as a guard, like if he was 6'4", he'd be in the NBA too, as long as he was more athletic then, because his skill game and craft game are elite.
My only quibble with you is I never want him to lose weight. I always want him to be the Serbian Boris Diaw and have it be part of his charm. And why does he always look like he has a cold? He always, nose is always red. He always has big red splotches on his arms. I hope he never changes any of that.
Have you seen, though, the picture from his passport?
Oh, I've tweeted it. It looks like...
So I saw it this summer. One of his agents actually owns a condo where I live, so we had lunch together, and he showed me, like, listen, I can never have you send this out. This is private, but I want you to see just what he's come from. And, of course, the first thing I said is, well, he's a 7-foot Augustus Gloop. Because I'm old enough to remember the original Augustus Gloop in the movie. And I always secretly hoped it would one day make it out. It wasn't. I don't know who put it out there. But so he's already lost weight. He already looks better. And the truth is, he's going to lose it. He's gonna lean out. I'm not saying he'll be naked one day on ESPN magazine like Kevin Love, who looks incredible, but he's going to lose weight.
I hope he is in the ESPN the magazine body issue as he is now. Okay, Coach, I got Nick Friedell standing by. Thank you for coming on and previewing Raptors-Sixers and all this other stuff. Everyone loves your insight. Coach Thorpe, thanks a lot.
Thanks, my man.
All right, let's welcome in our second guest, standing by in beautiful Los Angeles, California, covering what I think has been the single most surprising series of the first round that is still going on. Nick Friedell, my friend, how you doing out there?
I'm good, my man. I think there are a lot of people in that Warriors locker room who are surprised that this thing is still going on as well.
Did you start looking ahead, Nick? Are you guilty of looking ahead too?
Oh, hell yeah. I had the hotel reservations. I was trying to figure out the flights. I just needed the schedule for the rest of the days. But Zach, in defense of the Warriors in that regard, I really didn't think they were looking ahead in Game 5. They just got beat. It's almost a disservice to the Clippers to say, oh, well, the Warriors were looking ahead, so that's why they lost. No, the Clippers kicked their butt the whole night, and they have played hard throughout this series. In that game specifically, the Warriors tried to turn it on late. They just didn't have it because the Clippers has already put too much space in between where they were at.
I agree. I think the Clippers are really good. I just think this team has been in one playoff series that is extended beyond 5 games, the Durant team. And the second one of those, it shouldn't be the Clippers. Like, the Clippers aren't good enough to be the second team to take them beyond 5 games. LeBron couldn't take them beyond 5 games post Durant. All year I've been taking Warriors over the field, and we have a 5-on-5 on ESPN today where I think everybody but one person still took Warriors over the field. I think Spears was the only one who took the field. I'm officially beginning to waver. I'm just stunned. I'm stunned that this series is still going on. I'm stunned by Game 2, and Game 2 was the single most stunning single game comeback I can remember ever covering the NBA. Game 5, I would have bet ungodly sums of money on the Warriors to win Game 5. If you picked all the closeout games that were going on in those 48 hours, so Philly had a chance, Toronto had a chance, who else am I forgetting? Houston had a chance, somebody else, and the Warriors, I would have put Warriors were like number one most like. I didn't even think about it. I did not even think it was a possibility the Clippers would win Game 5. So to me, something isn't right. And everyone will just want to point to, well, Durant's free agency and Durant's being weird. He's like, point Durant, and then I'm Kevin Durant, give me the ball. And or they're looking ahead, or they're complacent. And I just think, like, okay, the complacency thing, that's cool. Like, you're supposed to flip the switch once. And once you flip it on, it's supposed to just stay on. You can't just keep doing this. We're like, oh, we were complacent again. Again, we're complacent. Oh, well, we were complacent again this time. Okay, well, if you're going to be, soon you're going to be complacent 4 times and you're going to be losing, and then you're going to go be complacent on the golf course. I don't understand what's happening, Nick. Is it just Durant? Is it just Durant's free agency ruining the team from within? I don't get it.
I don't believe so, Zach. Obviously, that's had a part in the whole season. That's been going on, and they've been dealing with it for 6 months at this point. The larger issue, and I think this gets lost in the shuffle as fans try to figure out exactly what's going on, is this team is just kind of mentally exhausted. 5 years of all the winning and the titles and the drama surrounding this season and the scrutiny day after day after day, they're just kind of mentally fatigued. I still believe they're going to win. I don't think that I think they're going to win the whole thing.
The whole thing.
I still believe that wholeheartedly. But it was my man, Crazy Tibbs, who always used to say, you build your habits in the regular season. And once you get to the postseason, it's tough to build new habits because they've been ingrained in you the whole time. The strangest part of the last week or so with the Warriors group to me is after Game 2, you mentioned the 31-point comeback for the Clippers. That locker room was shell-shocked. Cousins had just gotten hurt. They figured they were going to lose him for the rest of the year. Guys were sitting around looking at each other going, what in the hell just happened? That locker room was silent. The other night after Game 5, you walked in and it was like they had just lost a game in the middle of January. Like, you know, we'll get them on Friday. We'll get them in Game 6. I think guys were frustrated, but there was no gloom and doom, and there was no the sky is falling feeling from within. Now you could look at that two ways. You can say, all right, well, they've been through this before. They're not concerned, but it speaks to what you were saying. At some point here, and I still don't believe it'll happen this season, but at some point you can keep saying, we're going to flip the switch, and the switch isn't going to have enough juice anymore to turn on. In the end, I think the Warriors have too much talent and have too much pride to roll over, certainly to a team like the Clippers, but to not embrace the path they're on now, because they all know, despite all the flaws of this season, they're trying to make history. It's all about history. So I think they'll rise to the occasion moving forward. But that was very telling to me. It was like, after all the weird games, especially at Oracle, everybody kept talking about, let's protect Oracle and perform for the people in Oakland. They've been not great at Oracle all year. So, given what we've seen throughout the regular season, a game like Game 5, shouldn't be surprising in the context of what they've already done in the last few months. That idea that they were just going to dominate everybody in the postseason, it's just not the same as it was in years past.
Well, if they're not careful, they're going to get to perform a third time at Oracle against the Clippers in the first round.
Yeah,
they can keep performing at Oracle if they want and just juice the playoff revenue until they're out. But look, everything you said makes sense. They should win. If they didn't win this series, I'll be shocked. I'll be shocked if they lose tonight. I'm falling right back into the trap. Here's what's going to happen. The game's at 10 p.m. Eastern for some freaking reason. It's on the West Coast. The Warriors are going to be up by 20 at halftime, and I'm going to be like, you know what? It's been a long week. I got to rest up a little bit. It's almost midnight. I'm going to go to bed. I'm confident. I'm going to wake up and it's going to be like Clippers win by 2. I can feel it happening again.
Oh, no.
I know. I don't even know what I was going to say. If they win this series, next round is Houston. Okay. Joke's over now. Houston's good. Now, I don't know if they're better than they were last year, but I know that before the season, I thought they were still the second best team in the West and maybe the second best team in the league. I wrote that repeatedly. Everyone laughed at me when they were 11-14. This is the team they thought they were. This is the team we're going to start Eric Gordon, go all in on 3 guards, go all in on shooting. They're good. You get by them, okay, the Western Conference Finals, the way the bracket is shaken out, you're probably going to roll that. You should anyway. And then the finals, it doesn't matter which one of these teams comes out. That's going to be a good team. So you're talking 2 of the next 3 series that you theoretically will face the field in, if you get to face the field in 3 series, are going to be really, really hard series. They're going to have to play better than they've played, period. And by the way, there's this narrative about this series that, okay, so they won Game 1 easily. Game 2, we'll chalk that up as like a fluke. That was a fluke. They just stopped trying. Game 3 and 4, they went to L.A., curb stomped the Clippers, restored order. Game 4 was a close game. They ended up winning by 8, and they went up by 11 in the stretch run. But like that was a competitive, close game where the Warriors were playing with urgency. The Clippers play with urgency every second. I think Patrick Beverley sleeps with urgency. I don't even know how you would do that, but he does everything with urgency. He cooks with urgency. And they couldn't pull away from the Clippers in that game. So I don't think, and then of course the Clippers come to Oracle, and as you said, just outplay them, just beat them. I don't think that this has been an easy series for the Warriors. If you're lumping into Game 4 was proof that this is an easy series for the Warriors, I think really only Game 3 and Game 1 have been easy. Now, obviously, overall, the scoring margin is very big plus Warriors. I just think people are papering over Game 4. I think that was a competitive game.
It was. And in that third quarter, there was a time where you're going, all right, are they actually going to do this? Are the Clippers going to even this thing up? And I know that the Clippers players thought they were in position to be walking back into Staples with a 3-2 lead. I mean, they believed that they're right on par with where they need to be. But Zach, I'd add this, and I think this is what will push the Warriors to show us more than they have throughout this little stretch in these last few weeks. This team all year, just this year, they are so much better when their backs are against the wall, when people are saying, you know what? I think their time may be coming to an end, when people are questioning them. This group needs that motivational push of, maybe your time is over with. every time, and I go back to, you were just talking to Coach Thorpe about that Denver series. There was a game, I think it's defined their season. So many people hang on the blowouts and Oracle, but they were never too concerned about that stuff. There was a game a few months ago where they went into Denver. And prior to that game, everybody is saying, oh, the Nuggets, is it their time in the West? Can they make that kind of leap? And can they give the Warriors a real run? They go into Denver and they drop like 50 plus in the first quarter. They're hitting threes from all over the place. And I remember talking to Clay right after that game ended. And his point was kind of like, you don't think we hear what's going on? You don't think we hear people saying, maybe this is it for this run and maybe the dynasty's coming to an end. They know full well what's on the line. And I wholeheartedly believe that once the page were to turn into this potential Rockets series, that the focus would line up the way it has before. And I'm not saying it's not going to be tough, because they've proven that this team has proven repeatedly that they make things tougher than they have to be. But they know that the Rockets are that team that can really, really push them. And there's no fear from the Warriors' perspective, but the Rockets give them a pause that no other team in the league probably does.
By the way, shout out to my friend Scott Johnson, huge Nuggets fan, ahead of Game 7. I hope for his sake that they win, but I don't really care. I just want him to be happy. You mentioned the Nuggets. That reminded me. Okay. I agree. Look, I picked the Warriors to win the title. I've said all year, over the field. I'll take them over the field. If you put the metaphorical gun to my head right now, I'd still take them. They're 12th in defense in the playoffs. And I'm not looking at the rankings right now. That might make them, the worst team that's still alive in the playoffs. The Clippers are 15th. They've just not been good defensively. Well, actually now they've moved up to 11th after last night. Denver is now 12th. Game 5 might have been the worst collective defensive game I've ever seen them play in a game that mattered.
Yeah.
They would rotate away from shooters to non-shooters. Draymond, who's the heart and soul of their team, the thing that makes them special defensively, was just flat bad. Like, he was closing out wildly on guys who didn't need to be closed out on wildly and getting blown by. He was getting blown by even when he was not just trying to run somebody off the line. Now he had moments where, nobody reads the game as well as Draymond. So he's always in the right place. He had moments where he was thinking ahead of the Clippers and getting deflections and all the things he usually does. But overall, I thought he played one of the worst defensive games he's ever played in a real moment. And I've never seen anybody hunt Kevin Durant like Lou Williams does, like in Game 5. He wasn't just roasting Kevin Durant. Well, he was. He was bringing the ball up, pointing to Kevin Durant's guy like 10 times in a row and saying, come set a pick for me because I want that dude and I'm going to eat him alive. And he ate him alive. Like, fadeaways over him, crossed him up one time so bad he almost fell over, got into his little skinny body, and Lou Williams is skinnier than anyone, got into his KD's body and hit layups over him. The other gear, the switch that turns on, when we say that, we're really talking about defense and pace with the Warriors. Like, defense gets stops and run. It's defense. It was off in Game 5. And I think for some of it, like, they were trying. Like, Draymond's trying to close out on these guys. And it wasn't just, now some of the box outs were lazy. Some of the box outs were awful. Patrick Beverley just sort of, like, two guys are between him and the ball. They don't do anything. And he's like, yeah, I'm going to take this ball from you guys if you don't mind. Like, you're both a foot taller than me. I'm still just going to take it. Teams do that. Houston got 1 million offensive rebounds against them in Game 7 of the conference finals last year before they decided that boxing out was important again. I don't know. The defense is worrisome to me, and I'm not ready to just say, well, it's just an effort complacency thing. It's a little worrisome.
One of the questions, you mentioned that 5-on-5 that just got posted on ESPN.com. It was, do the Warriors have a defense problem? Fact or fiction?
Somebody said faction. I know that.
Yeah, it wasn't me, but I still say fiction for the broader conversation, because I don't believe it's a defensive problem so much as it's a focus problem. And it's been the same focus problem that has been alive within this group all year. When they decide that they're going to play, especially on the defensive end, as you mentioned, they can still dominate teams. And people have forgotten that because the evidence has shown that repeatedly this team just kind of has gone through the motions at too many times throughout the season. But moving forward now, Zach, into Game 6 and potentially into this Rockets series, I think Steve Kerr is going to stick with that Hamptons 5 lineup even more. You're going to say to Andre Iguodala.
That lineup is minus like 10 or something in this series.
So, yeah, it hasn't played that well, but it also hasn't played that much together yet. I think he will look around and go, you know what? These are the 5 guys I trust the most in the big moments. They have come through for me repeatedly over the last few years. It is time for you guys to close this thing down and move forward. And again, I can't stress this enough. It's about the challenge for this group, because everybody before the season had kind of already anointed them. Hey, you go win this 3rd title. We'll see what happens with KD in the summer. But this is your time. And these guys all appreciate the historical significance here. And maybe I'm naive to this because I'm still 5-6 months in following this team day to day, but you talk to each one of these guys individually and they all understood that they were playing for something larger than just one more title. They knew that there were so few teams who had gone to 5 straight finals. There were so few teams who had the success that they've had, the Bulls, the Lakers with back-to-back-to-back titles. They knew what they represented. And when times are tough for this group, they have responded many times over in finding ways to win games and finding ways to remind everybody just how good they can be. So I still think that's within them. It's just that they needed that wake-up call, and they've certainly gotten it from this Clippers team.
How many wake-up calls do they need?
They need lots.
Did they sleep? They're like the marathon runner on Seinfeld who slept through the first one or didn't get one. Like, how many do they need? Do they need to set 4 of them in their hotel room this morning every 10 minutes? How many? Are we going to be in the finals and they're going to be down 3-2? We need another wake-up call.
Yeah. Well, then everybody's going to go, oh, this is it. This is it. And there's, Zach, look, there's only so many times you can go to that well. There are only so many times, but this has gotten another thing that I think has gotten lost over this season. This team's talent level is still incredible. Steph. Yeah,
no kidding. They have Curry, Durant, Klay Thompson all on the same team, and Draymond Green.
And that's why in the end, I still think they're going to win this whole damn thing. But looking back, this Clippers squad, oh man, like I'm not sure what the future holds because of free agency, but this team plays its butt off. In that respect, this was not I guess you could look at it both ways. It wasn't a good team for the Warriors to face because we're sitting here looking at a Game 6 at Staples, but maybe it was because maybe it was that 5th wake-up call that they needed to kind of get rolling here.
Speaking of I hate the name Hamptons 5. I object to the Hamptons 5. I still call it the death lineup, as morbid as that is. Do they start that tonight? Because this JaMychal Green at center thing is troubling them, and I don't even think the Clippers are exploiting it as much as they could.
I don't think so, but as Kerr said, everything's on the table. And they've gone through all the film. They're going to try to pick up the matchups. Maybe that means more Kevon Looney.
He's been fantastic in this series.
Very, very good.
Maybe the middle ground is just start him over Bogut.
Right.
But he's been great. To your point about the talent level. So they're doing this thing where they have these minutes when Steph and KD are on the bench together, which drives all the Warriors fans crazy. And they also, when Durant goes out with like a minute and a half left to go in the first quarter, you very quickly get to lineups where Curry is the only good shooter on the floor. It's Curry, McKinney, Looney, Draymond, and some Iguodala. And this is the first, we've been looking at this Warriors bench for years and saying, well, they just don't have enough pop on the bench, and they don't have enough good bench players. And I've always sort of I've never believed that. I always thought they had enough talent on the bench. Andre is Andre. Sean Livingston has been very good for them. And they've always had a Barbosa to sort of zip around and do some stuff. And David West was big. But they always had backup big men who came in and did their stuff. This is the first time where I'm like, maybe it actually doesn't feel like Andre's just not there every game anymore offensively. Livingston, quietly, one of the unwritten stories of their season has been that Sean Livingston has finally taken the big step back he has 5 baskets in this series. I think he's 5 of 14 from the field. He's playing 12 minutes a game. They're just getting nothing out of Livingston other than, he's smart. He knows where to be. He's long. They're just getting no pop out of him at all. McKinney's all right. I think McKinney's defense in this series has been really good, but he's feast or famine with the jump shooting. And they don't have the Barbosa ingredient of the fast dude just flying around doing crazy stuff against the opposing bench. They don't have that anymore. And so you have these lineups where it's like, man, they got no shooting out there at all. It's not just 3 non-shooters. We're used to them playing with 3 non-shooters, Iguodala, Draymond, and a big man. Iguodala, Livingston, and a big man. It's 4 now. And that's when Curry gets to really handle the ball a lot. Curry's pick and rolls are way down in this series. It's a problem for them in crunch time. They need to let him handle the ball when their best players are on the floor. I don't know. Does any of that resonate with you?
Yeah, well, the group that says, I'll take the field, Zach, will hear that, what you just went through, and say, yep, see, because it's not only has the bench kind of wavered and you're not sure exactly what you're getting sometimes from the collective group, but and this speaks to what Steve Kerr's been saying the last couple of days. If you start playing Steph and Kevin and Clay and Draymond, if you're looking at that 40-plus minute max, that's all well and good to wrap up a Game 6 against the Clippers. Well, what happens when you're playing those guys a few more minutes each and every game in this next series, and let's say they get past Houston? Well, now you've added all these extra minutes, and how much is that going to come back to potentially bite you a couple months from now, assuming they were to get to the finals? So sure, the depth that has been there, as you outlined, the consistency of it isn't the same right now. But again, this team knows exactly what it has to do to still get over that hump. And I am convinced until they show us otherwise, that they will find a way to make it through one more time. The angst is understandable. The frustration from within with how they've played, it's there. They just need to remember what they can do when they're at their best. And I still think their best is within them, and we're going to see it here soon. They're
the best team in the league. Their ceiling beats everybody. Their ceiling beats everybody's ceiling. Totally agree with you. Their floor has gotten worse, and their 40 percentile game has gotten worse. And when they play that way, they're vulnerable. They need to play 75 to 100% percentile games to beat the best teams. And part of that is extending their best players, as you just said. And, as I'm going through the bench, I don't really think that Cousins is a huge loss for them. He was hurting their defense and taking shots away from their best players. But if they're going to juggle their rotations like this, I actually do think they miss him a little bit. They just miss another guy who can score and do stuff off the dribble. And Houston was the matchup they got him for. So I'm starting to sort of go back on my Cousins doesn't matter that much stance. I think they actually could. I don't think he matters that much, but I think they could use him a little bit if they're not willing to just play their best guys 40 minutes a game and play their best lineup 25 minutes a game. Look, I said before, I agree with you. If you force me to pick Warriors or the field right now, I'd still take Warriors, but it would be reluctant and uncertain, and I wouldn't put money on it. 2-3 months ago, I would have been, 80%, 70% confidence level. Maybe that's a little high. Now I'm 51 to 45% confidence level, maybe a little lower. I'm shaking, Nick. I'm shaking.
You aren't alone, buddy. You aren't alone, and it'll be okay. But the vulnerability, I've been making this argument the last couple of days. think this Warriors group right now is more vulnerable than it has probably ever been in this run. And you could point to some times with the Steph injury a few years back in the playoffs, and there were other moments where you kind of went, is this it? But there is so much focus and has been on what could happen in the future in the summer. And Steve Kerr has said repeatedly, his whole thing is we need to find our joy. We need to remember who we are. But I don't think that people are giving the group enough credit for just the mental exhaustion that comes with winning on this level. And I say that to people and they're like, wait a minute, what? So they're getting tired of winning? No, it's an accumulation of all the years.
It's an extra season. They've played an extra season now. And an extra season all against good teams. There's no Phoenix Suns in this season. There's no, the Brooklyn Nets before this season. They're just all hard games.
Which is why you saw them lose at home to the Phoenix Suns. I'm looking back on some of these games that they lost, and there were times they just didn't have it. But what I didn't expect, and I never expected, was a game like the other night. And that's the difference between this year's team and all the other teams we've seen before, because they didn't have it in a postseason game. And when you don't have it and you try to get it back late, I don't care who you are, in a playoff game when you're playing a team like that, you're not gonna be able to overcome what you've already done. So
do you still feel the joy, Nick? Do you have the joy? Are you bringing the joy to Game 6?
This season, I remember sitting in that studio with you in New York in October, and I'm saying, "Oh, this is Shangri-La. Like this is the best thing that's ever happened to me professionally." I go from the insanity of the Bulls to the Warriors, and everybody's in a good mood, and they're feeling great about where they're at. Zach, 6 months of this, oh my gosh, like every day there's something going on, and I wouldn't trade it. I've enjoyed the hell out of the experience, but I can understand why the players 5 years later are sagging a little bit, because when you are under that microscope all the time, and there are days you wake up and you're like, just have a normal game.
Well, it's amazing. Like I understand why Draymond and KD bolt the arena after Game 2. Because it's particularly Draymond knows, like, I'm going to say something that's going to be a news story. Whatever it is, it's going to be a news story. Yesterday, the music thing becomes a news story. Were you there, by the way? Were you in the scrum?
No, I was in LA already.
It becomes a news story that Draymond won't turn, or I guess it was Draymond. I don't know. Someone off camera said, well, Draymond this and that. That becomes a news story. There is no other team like that other than maybe the Lakers, whose emailing habits and alleged misunderstanding of BCC, protocol becomes a news story. And by the way, how are the Laker girls going on this interview of Monty Williams? How many people are going? 12? 15? Everyone's going. Why is Kurt Rambis involved? I don't understand. Anyway, this is just a whole other thing. Nick, maybe, I don't know where you're going to be headed. Well, you're headed to Oracle either way. One way or another, you're headed back to the Bay. So, I will be running into you, I suspect, in some point in the next few weeks. Your coverage has been outstanding, and I just want to make sure you just keep the joy in your life. Don't let KD and the White Sox hat after games take away your joy. Okay?
Yeah. Hey, we'll end on this, Mr. Lowe, because I think it's important. Kevin, out of all the different storylines of the season and the mood swings, Kevin's actually been in a pretty good mood here the last few weeks. And I think that's a good sign, not only in the moment, but moving forward, potentially. I keep saying that because you never know, but potentially in this playoff run, there is no worry yet. There is no panic within this group. And that's why, again, I think it's important in the context of what they've done to understand that they're not sitting here looking into Game 6 going, oh no, we better finish this off. They believe they're still going to win this thing, despite everything that we've seen throughout the year. The emotions are in check. Now, that may change if they lose on Friday night, but this team knows knows where it stands, and they're still totally confident that they'll be able to find a way through all the mess.
All right. Well, we'll see what happens tonight. I'm expecting a Warriors 12-point lead at halftime. Not a 20-point lead, but a really good first half by both teams where you see the Warriors really good is just 12 points better over 24 minutes and the Clippers really good. That's what I'm expecting. We'll see. Tonight's going to be telling because I don't care who you are. I don't care how good you are. I don't care what your pedigree is. If you're the heavy favorite, you do not want to be in a Game 7. You just don't want to. Game 7 is like if Lou Williams scores 50, because once out of every 60 games, Lou Williams is going to score 50. If JaMychal Green makes 8 threes, like, no, I'm serious. Like Game 7, I don't care who.
You never know.
I don't care who you are. You do not want to be in a Game 7 if you don't have to.
And all that pressure will be on the Warriors.
All right.
Every bit of it in a potential Game 7.
Nick, go do your thing. Thanks for making some time. Always enjoy talking to you. I'll see you soon, bud.
All right, you got it.